Explain. Arda had to admit this was an ironically calm response, considering his first initial internal reaction. His mind had completely blanked out, and all he felt was a mixture of immense relief and the temptation to blurt out with bewilderment, "So you're old?" It was admittedly quite embarrassing. Arda swallowed a bundle of nerves threatening to close up his throat. He could not, for the existence of him, make up his mind on whether he liked or hated his personality. And then as he thought about that, he realized that he wouldn't have felt either way if he didn't have it in the first place, and it wouldn't even be a problem. Basically, it was a downward spiral, and it made him realize exactly why existential crises were so common back on Earth. He also remembered having a similar experience on Earth before the apocalypse. Arda stared at the blonde before him. His hands were still on Arda's shoulders, so he reached up and gently took them in his own, putting them down on his lap. He held steady eye contact, though Blake clearly wanted to look away. It was like he couldn't. "Blake," Arda said in a low whisper. He scooted his chair closer. He thought it was quite ironic how fast the turntables... Wait, no, that's how fast the tables turned. Yeah, that's right. Blake had been the one comforting him, but now Arda was the one comforting him, directly after his own internal struggle. "Can you explain?" He could imagine what Blake was thinking, almost. He was just given confirmation and pretty solid evidence that he was not a human, but rather different. So much more so than anyone could understand, except for Arda. Arda's memories had come back, and he remembered clearly his early years. He had been created by Quinn Kindle to grow up normally, until he hit his late teens. For the first 17 years, he had lived in blissful ignorance, which was more than he could have asked for, and yet never enough. He thought he was a human, a normal orphan. Different, yes, especially since his apparent foster mother, Quinn herself, always brought him to the lab, or always ran tests on him, and always pushed him to learn and understand more than a child ever should. He didn't know any better, however. He thought it was normal. After all, he'd been told as much. He'd had as normal a childhood as he could have had, until the day he'd found out otherwise. It was also the day he realized that even when nothing about you has changed, knowing things you had never before known about yourself means that nothing will ever be the same again. Blake squeezed both his hands. "Arda, I've been hiding it and not answering your questions. I know you know that already, but I don't know how." "You don't have to explain if you don't want to," Arda interrupted. "Or if you can't." He paused. "Have you decided whether to leave or not, then?" "How is that relevant?" he asked, raising a subtle eyebrow. "But no, I would need some time to process before I make a decision." Blake breathed out, and some of the tension in his body seemed to evaporate. "Alright, I want to try and explain this." He looked away for a few seconds. Arda waited patiently. "I've already told you that I was found in Kendall Square 16 Zetan years ago," he began. "That's not entirely true. Maybe it's because I've finally seen this place, but I remember some things. Things I shouldn't remember because I was so small. But I guess that's just exceptions when it comes to biologically created humans. It's neither a curse nor a merit. It just is, right?" He let out a mirthless chuckle. "Anyways, I remember it clearly now. I may have been biologically a toddler, but I remember clearly waking up from stasis and going back into it twice before going above ground. The first time, I wasn't sure why it happened. It defied chemistry because my pod was fully functional. I suspect it's because of our entanglement, though. And the second time, I remember being woken up by Cleona. This was, I believe, 20 years ago. He gave herself some kind of solution, which made her about 30 years younger. Then I watched as she sabotaged other stasis pods filled with the scientists and important government officials from all over the world. They would come to Kendall Square as it was considered the most secure facility in the world. Arda blinked, and his eyes widened. She killed all of them? Blake shrugged. Yep. For reasons Arda understood, yet could not explain, Blake didn't seem bothered. I remember some of the specifics. There was never a set date for them to wake. They didn't know how long they would be there for, and by chance, Cleona woke first, as well as me. This was 20 years ago. She sabotaged every important figure from Earth. I know that much. Then she put me back in stasis. 4 years later, she came back and woke me up again, bringing me to Sector 8 and became my mentor as well as a mother. Ah, that was it. That was why he closed up, why he was reluctant to talk. Arda looked down. Blake was bouncing his leg, his hands gripping Arda's tightly. I guess now that I know my DNA was based off of hers, in a way, she is my mother. And she acted like one too. She taught me everything I know, passing down everything she knew. You asked me how I knew how to operate a drifter. She taught me. She cared, but she was always distant, saying and doing things like she wasn't fully there. She acted like an outcast as well, even when she worked her way up to second in command. No one in Sector 8 ever fully accepted her, because she had to peter out of thin air with no real reason, asking questions and looking like she'd just come from another world. What happened to her? Arda asked carefully. She's dead. Blake's face contorted like he didn't really want to believe it. She told me some stuff before she passed, 2 years ago. Some odd things. I think they were mostly dates, now that I really think about it. 339811, which is your birthday. Arda flinched involuntarily. Right, he didn't even think about that. Birthday. Could it really even be called that? Blake went on. 3456 4. March 13th, 3456. After hearing that video, that's me. Yeah, 3498 February 7th. That's the date Earth went into cryostasis. I've heard bits and pieces from her before that apparently millions of years had passed since then. Somehow, years before the apocalypse, before it got close enough to Zeta, some humans woke up and started rebuilding. Earth's history was lost and everything started over from practically scratch. His voice was calm, steady, and gave the impression that he was strong. But Arda could read body language like no others. Blake couldn't stop subtly shifting his position, eyes darting away, holding his breath, or squeezing Arda's hand like it was his lifeline. He knew Blake still felt the wounds of losing Cleona. He knew Blake couldn't get himself to let her go, that he constantly turned down the higher position Karata offered because he didn't believe he was better than his mentor. He was waiting for her to come back, to teach her more, to be the mother he never had, even when he knew she never would. The clues were there. It wasn't obvious, nor was it discreet. She also said something that I couldn't make sense of until recently, Blake said suddenly. When I met you, she said, I won't be around for long, and when I'm gone, you will find someone else to dedicate yourself to. I hated it at the time. I hated her for days for suggesting it, but I guess now I see what she meant. There was a long moment of silence. That's all I wanted to say for now, Blake murmured, as if he'd lost the energy to keep going. He let go of Arda's hands and used his own to bury his face in them, his elbows propped on his knees. Arda, have you made a decision yet on if you're leaving? It's hard to say, Arda replied. He stared at the top of Blake's head. He knew what Blake was trying to ask, even if he was trying to beat around the bush. To Arda, he was transparent. And I can't promise I won't decide to leave. I need to think over it first. Blake took a shaky breath, his shoulders tense. Please don't. Please don't leave. Even if I won't live forever like you, I can't continue living here alone when I know that I'm not. Arda pulled him into a gentle embrace. Shut up. He let out a startled, choked noise. What? You are human, Blake. Don't ever think otherwise. You're human, and even if you don't feel like one right now, you still are. Then what about you? If you're human, if I'm human, you're human too. And you heard Cleona. You are. Arda kept quiet, but kept Blake in his arms. He could imagine what the other was thinking. All the hurt that was elevated by confusion from Cleona's death was now fading, and yet there was the unending fear and anticipation that he might have to experience it all over again. All because of one decision Arda had to make. The knowledge that he was different was jarring. No matter how many compliments or insistence that he was human, it would never completely fade. The crushing feeling of loneliness, of getting the impression that you don't belong, you're disconnected from society. In a way, Blake had it worse than Arda. For all his life, he thought he was completely normal, a human. Nothing had suggested otherwise. His parents were probably gone, but other than that, he thought he was just like anyone else. And suddenly, he was thrusted into all of this, leaving him with little room to breathe and even less to think. To have his whole world shattered and know that he would possibly have to live the rest of his life alone like that, as well as face the loss of yet another person he cared for deeply. No, that possibility wouldn't come to existence yet. After all, Arda himself had many things to think, to wonder, and to ponder about. And there was the decision he had to make. The choice that would decide the fate of hundreds of people in Zeta. He sighed and forced himself to relax. Blake seemed to follow suit unconsciously. He had to think it over, then make a choice, but... Arda glanced at Blake, a hand on the back of his head for comfort. He didn't need to make the choice now, did he?